This is a special iFIBER 1 news presentation of the debate between candidates for Washington's 13th Legislative District, Democrat Kai Selmann and Republican Matt Manweller. The debate was held October 4th at Big Bend Community College.
Kai Selmann will go first, and he'll have 1 minute to explain his interest in this office.
So I'm Kai Selmann. There we go. I'm Kai Selmann. I'm running for this office. The reason I took this time to take time for my business, to take time for my family, is that we have some real pressing issues in this district. We have some real pressing water issues, transportation issues, and educational issues. Water is probably on the top of my priority list because the Odessa Aquifer, which all of us draw our drinking water from, at current rates of use and current rates of depletion, current rates of recharge and current rates of use, has about 5 to 10 years left. And unless we get some projects on that get more water into the ground, we're not going to be able to take water out of the ground. Our transportation issues, if we're going to expand economically, the port out here would really benefit from a rail line that came into it. We could do intermodal shipping out of the port instead of having to truck everything and clog up the I-90 corridor with trucks. So these are problems that, in my opinion, require someone who has the actions of a builder and not just the sound bites of a politician. So over the next hour here, you're going to hear some really good sound bites from Professor Manweller. He is a really good public speaker, much better than I am. And he knows the trigger words for a conservative district. He knows words like shrink government, rein in bureaucracy, and unleash power. Unfortunately, sound bites don't actually fix things. And when you actually look at what candidates have actually done in their lives, the policies that they've actually proposed, and did pass the sound bites, you'll get the chance to see how I propose solutions for the challenges to the district as opposed to my opponent. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Selmann. Dr. Manweller?
Thank you. Before we get started, I think we should thank Connie Cervantes, who's put in 6 months of work to make sure that this forum happens. So thank you, Connie, for all your work, and of course, thank you to the mayor, to the president, and faculty who have made this happen today. My name is Matt Manweller, and the reason I'm running in a minute or less is because I believe that we owe a responsibility to our children to leave them a Washington and America that our parents left to us. And when I look back at my family, my grandfather was at Guadalcanal, and my grandparents lived through the Great Depression. They were cheerful warriors because at the end of the day, they wanted to leave for my parents a better America and a better environment than they were given, and they did that. And my parents suffered through, the Vietnam War and the oil crisis, but they plugged along because they wanted to leave me and my brothers and sisters a more prosperous and more free and a country and a state with more opportunity than they had, and they succeeded. And I think that parents and grandparents today are looking at their children and grandchildren and asking themselves the question, are we going to be the first generation of Washingtonians and Americans who don't leave our children better off? And as long as we're asking that question, then I want to be part of the process, and that's why I'm running. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the audience, we're employing a modern presidential style format in which questions are asked to each candidate with a time response, and we're finding that time is very short, and I'm sorry for that. I'll pose questions starting with Mr. Selmann, and he has 2 minutes for a response, and then Dr. Manweller will have 1 minute for a rebuttal. And then the next question will go to Dr. Manweller for his 2-minute response, and then Mr. Selmann will have 1 minute rebuttal. We did decide this by coin toss, and follow-up questions will be posed in the same order to the candidates, except that follow-up questions will have 1 minute limits. These questions originated from community members in the 13th district representing different constituencies and interests. These particular questions have not been reviewed by the candidates or prepared by the campaigns. And again, I thank Christopher Riley, Chair of the Social Science Division here at BDC, for his serving as timekeeper. So, Mr. Selmann, first question. As you travel around the 13th district, what is your sense of the general welfare? What do you hear people say?
I think because of some of the things we have going for us, we've fared a little bit better than a lot of the country. We've still been able to drive some economic activity. It's still not good out there, but we fared better than a lot of folks. And the reason that we fared better is because we have cheap public power. And so even in an economy where many places are losing business and businesses are failing, we continue to get new investment from places like Google and Intuit because we've invested in low-cost public power and we've invested in fiber. And when we make these investments in the economy, we actually are able to bring new business into the area. So I think this is the recipe that has been responsible for the successes that we've had, and I think it's also the recipe that will lead to our continued economic growth without having to sacrifice environmental standards and without having to sacrifice the safety or the wages. I think this is how you create good paying, high-wage jobs in this district. Is you invest in the infrastructure and you invest in the education of the people who can work in these places. So that's the general sense I get of the district. We do have challenges, and there will need to be some regulatory reform in how our agencies monitor what we do. You know, for example, things like the Department of Ecology and those sort of agencies. But the largest thing you can do is change their funding structure so they're not primarily funded through fines and fees, because when you set up an agency to tell them they're going to be funded by fines and fees, that's exactly the behavior that they're going to exhibit. So we are going to have some changes to those to make life easier, but I think we should build on our strengths and make that the focus of what we spend our time doing.
Dr. Manweller?
1 minute to respond. Yeah, I've been traveling around 13th District for a year now. Put a lot of miles on my car, and here's what I'm hearing. From the small business owners that I meet with, they say, bring us regulatory reform. Get Department of Ecology and the Labor of Industries to step back a little bit so that we can hire people and that we can develop our business without being punished for it. When I talk to farmers, they say, bring us water. We're willing to work. We're willing to feed the world, but just make sure that we have access to the water so that we can do it. When I talk to educators, they say, we need funding, right? We can't teach kids. We can't keep our doors open unless we have the funding to provide that education so that these kids can get the jobs that we have available. And from healthcare advocates, what I hear is, keep our rural hospitals open. And so, I'm an advocate of critical access hospital funds for our hospitals. We need to find a 50-50 parity with education funding. We need to make sure that we bring another siphon down from Roosevelt, and of course we need to get Department of Ecology and Labor and Industries a little bit under control. Thank you.
Mr. Selmann, a follow-up question. Is there one overriding issue that you've heard, and if so, what would you do to address it? You have one more.
The overriding issue is water, because we can cut taxes and we can get Department of Ecology, they can be gone. Unfortunately, they're also the lead aid, which is a position that Manweller said, just the other day in front of the Yakima board, he said the Yakima editorial board, he said if it was up to him, he'd get rid of the Department of Ecology. Unfortunately, they're they're the people that have been doing the studies. They're the people that have been helping us map and figure out where the waters come from and where the water goes to. And in order to just dismiss them out of hand isn't the solution. So the way the geology is, the reason this seat is important is because the access points for the aquifer for here are in Lincoln County, and with redistricting, Lincoln County is now part of this district. So to have an advocate that encompasses both Lincoln and Grant counties is what we need to actually be able to get that water in the ground where it needs to be, so we have water when we turn the tap on. If you don't have water, it doesn't matter how low your tax rates are, businesses are not going to locate here.
Dr. Manweller?
Thanks. Well, I guess I'll borrow a line from Mitt Romney last night, that you're welcome to your own plane, but you're not welcome to your own facts. I don't think we should get rid of the Department Department of Ecology, and I never said that, but I do believe that the Department of Ecology needs serious reform, because I believe that they're an organization that has become unresponsive to the people and have become a primary job killer in the state of Washington. And I agree with Kai on one level that water is probably the #1 issue for Grant County, but I'll go in a different direction. And I say that we do need regulatory reform. Small businesses provide most of the jobs in Grant County, and these small business owners are just dying under these onerous, ambiguous, repetitive regulations that come out of ecology, labor and industries, fish and wildlife, health. You know, it's come to the point where it's not worth it to hire an additional employee because the costs that come with the regulatory burdens are just too oppressive. And so small business owners are saying, I'd rather work overtime than hire somebody else. I'd rather keep my business smaller than grow. We have to get the unelected bureaucracy under control to see job growth, and job growth will create the funding we need for education and healthcare. Thank you.